Hey, everybody, it is Trags Mike Petralia back with the latest episode of the Code Reds podcast on the CLNS Media Network. It's been a couple of weeks, so it's time to catch up on all things Reds baseball and Cincinnati baseball with Charlie Goldsmith of the Cincinnati Enquirer and Cincinnati.com. He does a tremendous job, as you all know, covering the Reds and the Bengals, and you can follow his outstanding work on Charlie's Chalkboard on Cincinnati.com and Cincinnati Enquirer. Correct, Charlie? I got all that right?
That is correct. I like the idea you said we're talking all things Cincinnati baseball. So maybe getting into the Norse's NCAA tournament run or UC and Xavier's bubble chances.
If I were more well-read, I probably would, but maybe that's a little bit of false advertising, but you get the drift anyway. Yes, I appreciate the sentiment, Charlie. No, we are sticking to the Reds here because it's been a couple of weeks since we've had a Code Reds podcast, and a lot has happened. Maybe, just maybe, the ship is heading in the right direction. The Reds, after finally winning a rubber game in Chicago, they snapped an 8-game losing streak in rubber games. They won that game in Chicago on Sunday 5-2. Alexis Diaz with his 12th save in 14 opportunities. The Reds are 6-3 in their last 9 games. May not seem like a large sample, and it really isn't, but certainly when you go 6-20, as this ball club did for a good portion of May, it's good to get into June on a winning note. I'm sure the players feel that way as well. In this 6-3 spurt, Charlie, what have you noticed in terms of improvement from the Redlegs?
Well, the bats have obviously heated up a bit. Getting TJ Friedel back, obviously an upgrade. Ellie has struggled, but Steer has kind of picked him up. He's turned a corner, it looks like. Jake Fraley keeps accumulating hits. Stevenson's playing some of the best ball of his career. But I think who really deserves most of the credit is the pitching staff. Even something as simple as like Saturday, it wasn't the final line that Hunter Green wanted against the Cubs.
Right.
But the fact that he got them 6 innings allowed Nick Martinez to be fresh for Sunday, and then he was able to go out and give him 2 shutout innings to close the series finale with a win. The pitching staff has given them so much stability. From a health standpoint, from an inning standpoint, They haven't had to make roster moves just to get a fresh arm. They have some roster crunches coming up. Like the pitching, again, has really just stabilized the group as a whole. And that helps you, be able to turn the corner quicker when you don't have the rug that could be pulled out from you, which a lack of pitching depth would be for any team.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And to your point, Charlie, the bullpen has really, really been strong. And it's not just them relying on Alexis Diaz at the end of the bullpen like they did last year. This year, they're getting a lot of good bridge performances to get to Alexis Diaz. Namely, if you take a look at what Nick Martinez was able to do in relief of Nick Lodolo on Sunday, he was very, very strong. Carson Spires, he has also been very good. But Nick Martinez and Carson Spires, as you know, Charlie, on May 26th became the first pair of Reds relievers to both pitch at least 3 1/3 innings in a game. Now, I believe that was an opening situation where, if I'm remembering correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, but to start that game, the Reds had an opener, and then Nick Martinez came in for Brent Suter and pitched very strong. I think that was the Sunday game. Am I remembering that correctly,
That
Charlie?
is correct. That is correct.
Okay. I thought, I'm getting old, but not that old. But anyway, Martinez and Spires, that's an example right there, Charlie, of the bullpen being put in a position where, obviously they're starting the game with an opener for a reason. But for Nick Martinez to really pick it up there against the Dodgers and then again on Sunday against the Chicago Cubs, he is starting to become that picture I think they thought they were getting when they signed him as a free agent in the offseason from the Padres.
Yeah, I think the word of the day in this conversation is versatility. And versatility is something we so often just associate with position players who can, Spencer Steer is versatile. But the Reds have their most versatile pitching staff with the group of guys they have. Like Nick Martinez, he can give you a start. He can pitch multiple high leverage innings. They've had guys like Carson Spires come up and down who are more than just long relief innings eaters. They have a bunch of guys who can go multiple innings. Fernando Cruz has done that more consistently recently. They have a bunch of guys who can, they've never had this much depth of left-handed pitching options. You can bring Sam Mullen for a matchup, then bring Wilson in for a matchup. Young's been up. Suter's been there all year. They can play more matchups. They have more guys who can cover longer stretches of the game. That just gives David Bell probably a dozen more options in every situation that could come up over the course of the game than the Reds had previously. This depth and versatility was their top priority during the offseason, and you're seeing it definitely help out.
Yeah, I definitely would agree with that. And, back to that point about the Cincinnati relievers pitching to the 2.08 ERA, that's good for the third best mark among Major League bullpens in that span, trailing only the Houston Astros and the Philadelphia Phillies. To the starting rotation, you mentioned Saturday night and the job Hunter Greene did in very difficult conditions. I want to talk a little bit more about Saturday night because I was kind of on a rant. I'll full disclosure here. I'm watching the game. Game starts at 10:35 Eastern time. So what? It's a Saturday night. Everybody can stay up on a weekend night, even the kids, even though we're in summer break now. But my big issue with that were the conditions that game was played in. From what you understand, Charlie, what was the biggest reason for playing that game, especially when you have a team or two teams that play in the same division that are going to be playing again at Wrigley Field later in the season? Why was there such a need to play that game?
It's a great, I don't know. The weather and scheduling is one of the, what's the best way to say this? It's an interesting little world full of conversations.
It's a dark hole sometimes.
And back and forth. And there's a lot of really interesting details that go into this that always, the media and the public don't get exposure to.
Right.
Clearly, both sides were on the same page, I guess, but certainly it didn't seem like the ideal conditions to play a game.
Well, and the reason I bring that up is Seiya Suzuki hits the grand slam. He commits the 3-run error in the top of the second inning, I believe it was, and then redeems himself right away in the bottom of the second inning with that grand slam against Hunter Greene. It almost looked like to me, Charlie, and I don't know if you got the same impression, Hunter was like, screw it, I'm just going to throw a fastball. I'm tired of throwing in these conditions. He did not have the best command, and who could blame him in those conditions, for his breaking ball, his slider. So I think the pitch he felt most comfortable with in that situation, at least throwing it for a strike, bases loaded, full count, would be the fastball. Did you get that feeling at all, or am I just babbling here?
Yeah, I mean, pitching in those conditions are just their own thing. It's just its own experience. And it was, it's a good question. I can't remember Hunter pitching in a similar situation over the course of his career with rain like that. Maybe I'm wrong there, but I don't remember that to that extent. And, you talk about a young pitcher developing. Honestly, considering the conditions, I'll take that performance out of Hunter Greene. He gave the Reds depth. He kept the team in the game. He was ultimately one pitch away. But he showed that even on a night where you can't dial back and let that fastball go as aggressively as you'd like, he was still able to get some really consistent results and do some nice things down the stretch. Ultimately, even though it was a loss and even though he allowed 5 runs, I see that as a decent game for Hunter Greene.
Yeah, and, 200, and speaking with Charlie Goldsmith of the Cincinnati Enquirer and Cincinnati.com, doing a great job covering the Reds and Major League Baseball, as well as the Bengals and the NFL. But here we're talking about the Reds. And with Hunter Greene, what impressed me most, Charlie, was to get through that inning and get through the psychological punch that he took to the gut of giving up a game-tying grand slam. And to me, that's just as important as him physically getting his mechanics down on the mound and working through what he has to physically. That emotional type of challenge, that emotional adversity, if you will, to get past that really shows me that Hunter Greene's maturing.
That's exactly right. About a week ago, I did some interviews with Hunter about Hunter with a couple of guys around the team. And the thing Derek Johnson stressed the most were kind of these adverse situations like you're describing. We saw a lot of games in the first 2 years of Hunter's career where he had to go in the third or the fourth inning because he made one bad pitch and then it unraveled and then the game got away from him and then he lost confidence or command of one of his pitches and he doubted sequencing and stuff like that. And things really snowballed after bad moments. And very, very consistently, again, even in the games where Hunter's allowing more runs than he wants, he's giving the Reds 6+ innings. There's just Nick Martinez really stressed a maturity and a confidence and a almost certainty in approach that he's seeing with Hunter Greene. And again, those are the signs you want to see from a guy you really believe in.
Something else, while we're staying positive here, Charlie, that I want to focus on is what Nick Lodolo gave the Reds on Sunday afternoon. And, he was given an early lead and he was able to protect it. And I think that was a big deal. I know the guys on TV, certainly John Sadak was making this point. Chris Welsh was making this point. I think Cowboy on the radio was also talking about this. Lodolo, given a lead to work with, looked like a veteran pitcher working with the lead. That's the sense I got. How about you?
I mean, the ultimate sign of a veteran in the game is what do you got when you don't have your best stuff? And, literally since the day they drafted Lodolo, it's that incredible breaking ball. There's not another pitch of baseball like it. I don't know that Lodolo's had a worse game with his breaking ball that I've seen. 0 swings and misses. He ended up throwing his changeup like more than his breaking ball. He usually throws like 5 changeups a game. And the fact that he was able to win against a division team that knows him well without his best pitch working for him, I mean, that's big. That's a very, very notable moment for the confidence and effectiveness he can get out of the changeup with the reliability of the fastball, and then overall the mound presence and the ability to adjust when you have to make it work on the fly when you don't have your signature pitch working for you.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I just like the fact, Charlie, that Nick Lodolo is expected to be, if not Hunter Green, the ace, certainly ace 1A on this pitching staff. And I think they expect, his stuff is as good as you mentioned, the breaking ball, certainly that breaking ball towards the back foot of the right-handed hitter is one of the best pitches in baseball any starting pitcher has in MLB. And when he can use it, when he can command it, especially ahead in the count, he is a devastating pitcher. But Nick Lodolo came out, and the Reds really needed to win that game. And I know there's not pressure per se early June, but I think in this particular case, you can make the argument that the Reds needed that game. We already talked about the fact that they had lost, I think, 8 straight games in rubber game situations. For Lodolo to come out and answer the bell, big deal to me.
I mean, ultimately, too, it's your stars lead you to wins. And, Lodolo's not a star yet, but he certainly is on that track. And you have Lodolo doing what he did. You have Friedel, arguably the team's MVP from last season, doing what he did. Ellie is in a terrible slump, but he made an incredible defensive play on a flip up the middle yesterday. Yep. Like stuff like that wins you these games. You've got to have. And the Reds keep showing they've got some players who can do stuff like that.
You bring up TJ Friedel, and I think TJ Friedel is a fascinating case study to what his presence could mean in the lineup. I throw out the 6 games between him coming back from his beginning of the year injury and getting his left thumb fractured in San Diego. I think it was May 12th when he had that injury and went on the injured list the next day in Arizona. So I throw that out. Let's assume that his season has started once again. I think what he's meant to the top of the order since he's been back the second time is a big deal. Obviously, he had the 3-run homer on Sunday, and that was a big moment in the game, no question. He's been walking more. He's been getting on base, and I think he's starting to show at the top of the order, Charlie, what he can mean to this Reds lineup.
We can talk about Friedel, the player. What I think is really interesting here, too, is like with Friedel back, everyone's now in a role that makes sense. Benson actually played a lot better in center than I expected. But Benson is back as a corner outfielder who just starts against righties. Nick Martini's a guy who's hitting 7th instead of 5th. Or you can go down the line. There, the trickle effect of having one guy at the top who's in the perfect spot for him, and the impact that has on the entire lineup. Now Mike Ford's not in the lineup anymore because TJ Friedel's back. That's literally whose spot he took. So again, everyone's in a spot that makes sense for them to be in. India batting 8th, playing second. Steer can move around more, maybe even play a bit more first base, which is probably his best defensive position. You have more opportunity. You have more options on the bench. Fairchild and Espinal now aren't playing against righties. Like all of these little things add up. Hurtubise is in more of a matchup situation type role. All of it makes more sense with Friedel back in the lineup.
I agree with that 100%. And his average is not going to stay at 167. for very long. I think eventually he's going to come around. And when he does come around, Charlie, I think that's when this Reds lineup, everybody was bitching and moaning. And I understand why through a large portion of May. Where's the offense? The offense is, obviously for a couple of weeks there, they had the worst average in all of Major League Baseball. And it's starting to slowly tick up. Right now, it's at 220. It was at about 211 there for a while. It's starting to slowly pick up. And I think TJ Friedel's return to the lineup is a big part of that.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, again, kind of with the point I was talking about, like you had Hurtubise batting the leadoff, and I like Hurtubise. I think he's really impressed me. Not quite a leadoff hitter yet. Mike Ford, not a number 3 hitter right now. You're not building your lineup around Martini and Ford as your power bats. Like it's not ideal to play Espinal and Fairchild as much against right-handed pitching as the Reds were, and you can go down the line. All of these problems are starting to get solved with the guys coming back. And then, of course, you also have Fraley getting his timing back after getting sick. You have Steer finally getting some luck to go his way, even though, the underlying metrics have been consistent for him all year. Benson has looked a lot better over the last 2 weeks. He's made some adjustments. So overall, some guys are starting to find who they are at the plate.
Okay, one of the plays of the year, certainly, that everyone's talking about. And I think in terms of the Reds staying afloat here and trying to find their level as they try and gain some momentum here as we head into the middle part of the schedule in June, was that win on Friday. And the play of Hurtubise, thank you, and Ellie De La Cruz. Those two made great plays on throwing out the runner at the plate, Nick Madrigal. But you make a point, and I forgot where you made this point, but you made a point that there's a third player who made a very underrated but yet very important, had a very important role on that play. Who was it?
I don't know where you're going here, so I'm just going to answer both. I'll answer both because I think there are 2 answers here. The technique for the catcher is very difficult.
Yes, that's where I was going.
On the right side of the plate. And, we saw with the whole Tommy Pham play yesterday, that the timing of where a catcher can line up and how you time that play can be very, very difficult. The other answer to that question, I don't know if this is where you're going. How about David Bell pushing the right button? Hurtubise in for a pitch runner, Steer to second, Hurtubise stays in and left. We'll never know if Steer is able to get to the ball that quickly, but Hurtubise is definitely a guy with more speed and more range to get to a ball like that than Spencer Steer. So all these little things add up, a bunch of different hands in play for the Reds to make that big play.
What impressed you the most when you were watching it live? I guess what blew me away was the throw of Ellie. We all know he's got a cannon. It was an accurate throw. And, I think we take for granted sometimes Ellie's ability to throw the ball not only with a great deal of velocity, but throw it for the most part very accurately. That's what impressed me. I don't know, when you look back at that player, is there something that as you were watching it real time, is there something that impressed you?
So it made me think of a story I did last year. Ellie set the record with like a 99-mile-an-hour throw, and I talked to Derek Johnson and a bunch of Reds pitchers about his arm. And it's funny, like Fernando Cruz calls his splitter his gift from God. And I was going back through that story, and before I had heard Cruz say that about his splitter, there was a quote in there that was kind of a fun moment where Cruz said, "That's Ellie's gift from God." And so he dubbed that arm the gift from God before he dubbed his own splitter the gift from God. But I think there's something really to that. Like, it's just something you got or you don't. And the ability to reach back to find that in that situation with that level of pressure and to make a throw like that. I mean, like, it reminds me of this too. Like, literally the first thing I heard about Ellie De La Cruz was it was when he was an A-ball. Not low A in 2021, right as he was coming out of the complex league, because you were seeing this power and speed metrics that were coming out. The first thing someone told me about Ellie is this guy has great instincts and plays the game the right way, and he plays the game. He has fun with it, and he takes advantage of moments like these. And there were moments like that, like there was a first to third play that someone told me about in his first week in A-ball, and like that's just Ellie playing the game with his tools. And here he is in the big leagues making an incredible throw. You can't coach that, can't teach that. Just a kid making a play with those tools.
By the way, I think a terrible break for LA on Saturday night in that game when the Reds, I believe, had just tied the game 5-5, if my memory serves, and he slides into third base. It was a terrific first to third play, and he had beaten the throw, and he comes off the bag ever so slightly between, the hand comes off and before your back knee can hit the bag and stay on the bag, there's that instant. And because we have instant replay now, that's reviewable. And it was in that instant that he was thrown out. To me, that was a bad break. You agree?
It's funny, too. We're talking about things you can't coach or teach. The Reds don't practice sliding during spring training. It's just, find a way to stick to the bag and hope for the best. That's kind of what it is for every team, the way I understand it. And good luck. May the odds be in your favor. And that time the odds weren't in Ellie's favor.
Okay, one more thing, and then we'll wrap it up here, Charlie. And I want to talk about a player, another unheralded player who, again, you talk about David Bell pushing all the right buttons on Friday. When he pinch hit Will Benson with Santiago Espinal and produced one of the big moments of the game, the go-ahead 2-run homer. Santiago Espinal is somebody who has impressed me the more time that I've seen him get. And as the season goes on, we figure it's going to be more off the bench defensive replacement and what have you. But the more I see of him, the more I like him, and the more I understand why Nick Krall wanted to go out and supplement the roster with a guy like him.
I mean, he's a guy too. You mentioned that, and you're giving Nick credit for going out and seeking Espinal, and there are things to give Nick Krall credit for. But this Espinal trade happened in a couple hours. This was not like the Reds had a crush, as we like to say in the NFL draft, on Santiago Espinal for years, and then finally the timing worked out to make this deal. This was the Reds. It was right after McClain. They realized
yes.
He did surgery, and Friedel was hurt, Marte was suspended, and it was, I don't want to say. It was the most stressed I've ever seen this group. It was, we need an infielder now.
Yes.
And to go out and get Santiago Espinal, who's a big leaguer. And, I mean, he's clearly proven that. He's just got really good hands, and that shows up with his turns. That shows up with, the way he rotates the bat and kind of has some quick twitch that way down the line. He just does some things well. And for a guy, again, a trade that was negotiated in a couple of hours when the Reds, let's face it, could have been a little desperate. For that player to be a guy who, maybe he's your 26th man, when everyone's back. Maybe he has options. He's your 27th man. That's a great, the bar isn't very high in terms of OPS for that type of player. And Santiago Espinal is that type of player and that level of guy, and is a good guy to have in that role.
So you are in Denver getting ready for the back end of the 6-game road trip through Chicago and Denver as the Reds take on the Rockies, who have been playing a little bit better of late. I believe they're up to 21 victories, while the Reds stand right now, if I've got my numbers right, 26-33 on the season. So anything you're working on for Charlie's chalkboard as we look ahead to the back end of the road trip here?
Charlie's chalkboard is going to be Bengals focused this week. I'm excited about a story I got coming out there.
Okay.
Red Stories, I have a story that published about 5 minutes ago on Tyler Stevenson. And while he's playing better defense and while he's hitting better, it's really the prep he does in pregame meetings. That's been the biggest difference this season.
Excellent. That sounds like a winner, and you can follow all of Charlie's terrific content on Cincinnati.com as well as the Cincinnati Enquirer. That is a premium subscription service, though, correct? Just full disclosure here, Charlie?
Well, some of it is. Some of it's behind a paywall and some of it's not.
Okay. Just want to throw that out there.
No, that's an important question.
Yes. Well, we try to promote, not just promote our guests and give them the love that they deserve, but do it accurately so nobody comes back to me and says, what the hell were you doing? I can't get it. You didn't tell me I had to pay for it. So I just try to give full disclosure to people so they don't yell not only at you, but yell at your wonderful host here of the Code Reds podcast. Well, have a good time out there, Charlie. Enjoy Denver. It's as you and me both know, it's a great football town. I always love going out there for a Bronco game. But the Rock Pile, this is your first trip there, right?
It is, yes.
Take in the Rock Pile. The Rock Pile is uniquely Coors Field, so enjoy it.
Well, thank you, Trags.
All right. He is Charlie Goldsmith, does a great job covering the Reds and Bengals for Cincinnati.com and the Cincinnati Enquirer. I want to thank him. And I also want to thank the great people out there who download this Code Reds podcast every week. Thanks for subscribing and tuning into the CLNS Media Network. Until next week, follow the Reds and follow all of my work on the platform formerly known as Twitter. Follow me at Trags, Trags. That's Code Reds for this week. Talk to you next week.